Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Businesses across the United Kingdom receive important financial support from government in the form of rates relief. But when this cash reaches the SNP government, they spend it on other things like their £500 million ferries, their £7 billion benefits bill and their propaganda papers on independence. Scottish businesses need this cash. They are suffering badly, with hospitality, including pubs, suffering more than most. The SNP have failed to pass on at least £700 million of business rates relief since 2022. Can John Swinney therefore tell us exactly where this money has gone?
First Minister.
So the Government, in its forthcoming budget that will be discussed by Parliament over the next few weeks, is putting forward a package of reliefs worth an estimated £864 million, which enables us to sustain the small business bonus scheme, which has been a hallmark of this Government's approach, and also offers a 15% relief to retail, hospitality and leisure premises liable for the basic or intermediate property rate in mainland Scotland. So these are just some of the measures the Government puts forward to make sure that we support the business community as they wrestle with the challenges that they face.
Russell Finlay.
Budget, but the Scottish Beer and Pub Association say the SNP budget falls well short of what is needed for many pubs across Scotland. And pubs are closing in Scotland at the rate of one every single week. Almost 300 have been forced to close their doors in the past 5 years. And just this week, a new survey revealed that 1 in 7 pub owners are thinking of calling time for the last time. Now, John Swinney must take action now to stem the flood of pub closures. My party is campaigning for 100% rates exemption for all small and medium-sized hospitality business. But John Swinney has rejected our calls, so more jobs will be lost and communities will lose their pubs. Can John Swinney therefore explain why he is happy to kill off Scotland's pubs?
First Minister.
Well, that's not what the Government is doing. What the Government is doing is decreasing the basic, intermediate and higher property rates to deliver a broadly revenue-neutral revaluation over the revaluation cycle. This will be the lowest basic property rate for properties with a rateable value up to and including £51,000. And of course, what I said earlier about the small business bonus scheme applies in many cases. And of course, that is part of an overall package worth an estimated £864 million. Now, what I would also say to reassure Mr Finlay about these issues is that the Scottish Government has committed, once we are clear on the consequential funding, if there is any, that comes to us from the changes that have been made by the United Kingdom Labour Government on pub and hospitality relief, which was announced in the last couple of weeks. Once we are clear about those financial implications, we will allocate those to safeguard the future of the hospitality sector, and we will allocate that in full once we are clear about the amount of money that's involved.
Russell Finlay.
That answer was all froth and no beer. Scotland's pubs are in the eye of a perfect storm from two anti-business governments. Labour is hammering them with crippling jobs tax in the form of national insurance increases, while the SNP fails to provide lifeline financial support through rates relief. And now they're reeling even more after being hit with eye-watering new rates bills. One Glasgow pub has been hit with a rise of 576%. These increases are inexplicable, they are unfair, and they will cost jobs. Stephen Montgomery of the Scottish Hospitality Group says that the SNP government is punishing Scottish hospitality. He backs my party's campaign to halt these devastating new tax rises. Now, John Swinney has got the power to act, so will he do so, or is he going to call last orders on Scotland's pubs?
First Minister.
President, I acknowledge the implication for business of the increase in employers' national insurance contributions. I think it is, and I've made this point on multiple occasions in Parliament, it is a very damaging measure in terms of growth within our economy to have had those increases in employer national insurance contributions from the Labour government. But what my government has done is that we've put in place measures to support the business community as a consequence of revaluation and also as part of the support that we have in place. So we will introduce a revaluation transitional relief scheme to protect those seeing the most significant increases in rateable values, ensuring that gross bills of an estimated 60,000 properties are lower in 2026-27 than they would otherwise have been. And that is part of the overall support of the Scottish Government, which is designed to support the business community when it faces challenges in this particular period.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. Labour politicians were barred after Rachel Reeves' damaging budget. They were barred from pubs across the United Kingdom. Now, one of Scotland's leading businessmen is calling for SNP ministers to be locked out from their locals too. Sir Tom Hunter describes the SNP government's rate system as being, and I quote, not fit for purpose. He said, let's ban every government minister from their local pub until the business rates are fixed. Now, I'm sure many punters would raise a glass to that, but we don't want to give ministers an excuse not to buy around, which is why I've spoken with Sir Tom Hunter. He's agreed to meet with me and the First Minister at a pub to hear about Scotland's pub crisis.
Go for a drink, John.
So will John Swinney join us to settle this over a pint?
Yes.
First Minister.
I can think of anything less appealing than having a pint with Russell Finlay. I have a trip to the dentist that would be more preferable than going for a pint with Russell Finlay. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm
terribly
sorry if that's been a wounding set of exchanges in my typically generous style in Parliament, but I think most of the Conservative Party will agree with me. A pint with Russell Finlay is totally unacceptable on any occasion. To be serious, I accept the significance of these issues. I also take deadly seriously what Sir Tom Hunter says, and I engage with Sir Tom Hunter on a regular basis about a whole host of different issues, and I welcome his contribution to Scottish public policy and policy debate. But what I assure Mr Finlay about in every circumstance is that my government will do within the resources available to us all that we can to support business and the growth and the development of the Scottish economy, the success in investment, the bringing in of jobs, the low levels of unemployment. That's because this government's on the side of business and the economy in Scotland.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney has repeatedly said in this chamber that the first time the Scottish Government became aware of infection issues at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital was March 2018. Does he stand by that position?
First Minister.
I do, Presiding Officer.
Anna Sarwar.
Just like last week, I'm going to prove to the First Minister that what he's saying is a blatant untruth, because this Scottish Government document makes clear that he knew before March 2018. It's here in black and white. March 2017, there was a higher-than-expected incidence of Aspergillus. Health Protection Scotland reported to the Scottish Government. July 2017, positive cases of Stenotrophomonas. Health Protection Scotland reported to the Scottish Government. Evidence of serious warnings to this Government ignored. Aspergillus took the life of Andrew Lawrence. Stenotrophomonas took the life of Millie Mayne. These deaths and many others were preventable. And we now know that the Scottish Government evidence to the inquiry is incomplete. There were in fact 14 alerts to the Scottish Government between 2015 and 2018. So doesn't this prove that John Swinney's not telling the truth about what he and the Scottish Government knew and when and what they did about it?
First Minister.
President Officer, the evidence before the inquiry clearly shows that the Scottish Government was only made aware of a water contamination issue at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in March 2018. Incidents reported through the Hospital Infection Incident Assessment Tool prior to March 2018 did not suggest there were wider problems with the water system at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. All of this evidence is already before the inquiry, and it is right that Lord Brodie be given the time and the space to get to the truth for families without political influence, interference or speculation on the outcome of his conclusions.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, it's not speculation, it's Scottish Government documents that proves that what John Swinney is saying is not true. This was Scotland's newest and largest hospital, and Shona Robeson and the Scottish Government got 14 alerts about infections between 2015 and 2018. Warning after warning was sent to the SNP Government and met with inaction, and people died as a result. Worse than this, the Scottish Government's instinct was to close ranks and cover up. And nowhere is this clearer than a senior official, the Chief Nursing Officer appointed by Shona Robeson and the SNP, saying she couldn't understand why Greater Glasgow and Clyde had not just offered the families 50 grand, which is a trip to Disneyland. Shameful! Utterly shameful! And it should shame every member in the SNP government and on the SNP benches. Bribes rather than truth and justice. So enough! Enough! The pain this government has inflicted on these families is through the roof. So enough! Finally stop. Stop the denials and the cover-up. Stop the gaslighting of the families and the whistleblowers and the staff. And for once, just be honest.
First Minister.
I am horrified by the suffering of the families that have been affected by the losses in relation to the water contamination issues at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. That is why this government set up a public inquiry, so that Lord Brodie could undertake all the examination of the evidence to look at all of the issues that are involved and to give the truth to the families involved. And I want to make, and I have been, Mr Sarwar, for a week, has basically attacked my personal integrity. And it is unrelenting what Mr Sarwar is doing, and it is a sign of total desperation by Mr Sarwar in how he is conducting himself. Now, Mr Sarwar has written a letter to Lord Brodie. I am appalled by its contents. It is direct political interference in the conduct of an independent inquiry, and Mr Sarwar should be ashamed of himself. I will allow, because we have...
Let's hear one another.
This government... This government
colleagues,
has
sorry, First Minister. Be very grateful if we could all hear one another. Those who have gathered to hear would like to be able to follow proceedings. First Minister.
This government has established an independent public inquiry led by Lord Brodie. We will respect the law and allow Lord Brodie to undertake his inquiry, and we will distance ourselves entirely from the direct political interference that Anna Sarwar is perpetrating in his letter to Lord Brodie. The Labour Party and Anna Sarwar should be ashamed of themselves for their conduct.
Question number 3. I call Gillian Mackay.
Drilling for oil and gas in the Rosebank oil field is set to tip Scotland over the edge of climate disaster. And this week we also learned it will directly fund a company complicit in the illegal occupation of Palestine. Campaign group Uplift has obtained legal advice which says granting permissions for Rosebank could be a breach of the Geneva Conventions. The Scottish Government used to have a clear position on this. Under Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, it was opposed to Rosebank. Under the current First Minister, no one is sure. So can the First Minister confirm, does he still stand by this Parliament's commitment to boycott Israel? And if so, does he agree that the Rosebank oil field should not go ahead?
First Minister.
The Scottish Government's position has been consistent about the necessity for any new developments to be compatible with our agenda and our direction on climate action. So that is the consistent position that has not changed in any of the leaderships of the three First Ministers that Gillian Mackay mentioned. In relation to, so that is the test that's got to be applied on Rosebank, and that is the test that the courts require to be undertaken in that respect. And of course, that's a decision for the United Kingdom Government. And secondly, in relation to the situation in Israel, I set out to Parliament in my statement in September the steps the Scottish Government is taking to act on the issues of connection with organisations with a business interest in Israel, and the Government has taken forward those actions.
Gillian Mackay.
Previous First Ministers have provided a clear yes or no as to whether they're against Rosebank, and I think it would be good for this First Minister to provide one. But warm words aren't good enough when climate destruction is funding illegal occupation, and we must put a stop to this. So the First Minister must understand why so many of us are frustrated by the news this week. The National has reported that following this Parliament's historic vote last year to boycott, divest from and sanction Israeli companies, the Scottish Government has not commissioned a single briefing from officials on how to implement this action. And my colleague Patrick Harvey's questions on the subject from October still remain unanswered 17 weeks later. So, First Minister, is your government truly committed to boycott Israel and support the people of Palestine? And if so, when will we see action?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the steps the Government has taken following my statement to Parliament on the 3rd of September involve instructing relevant delivery bodies such as Scottish Enterprise, where possible, to not provide support for trade between Scotland and Israel, and pausing new awards of public money to defence companies whose products or services are provided to countries where there is plausible evidence of genocide being committed, including Israel, which is the requirement that I placed into our policy in relation to the application of international law. So those issues are the explanation of the taking forward of the position that I set out to Parliament on the 3rd of September, and I hope that provides the reassurance that Gillian Mackay seeks.
Question number 4, Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister how the new measures that the Scottish Government has announced to tackle long-term unemployment will support its work to grow Scotland's economy. First Minister.
Well, so Scotland's unemployment rate is already lower than that of the United Kingdom, and most people go back into work within 6 months. But we are keen to further reduce economic inactivity, because that is a key to growing our economy. Our draft 2026-27 budget puts £90 million into devolved employability services so more people can get the support they need to move into work. We also know childcare is a key to helping parents work. That's why every primary school child in Scotland will have access to a breakfast club in August 2027, supporting families, boosting well-being and removing barriers to employment. And to make sure families know what help is available, we are launching a new parental marketing campaign, making it easier for those at risk of poverty to find and access support.
Rona Mackay.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. While the Scottish Government is helping people into work, Labour's policies at Westminster are costing jobs. The rise in employers' national insurance contributions is damaging employment opportunities across the country, while Westminster's fiscal regime continues to cause hundreds of job losses in Scotland's industries. In the face of this, can the First Minister say any more about the Scottish Government's work to boost growth, create jobs and help people into work?
First Minister.
By targeting investment and providing tailored support and a focus on skills, we are determined to create pathways into work for thousands of people. The £90 million that was announced by the Deputy First Minister earlier this week will provide £40 million to support parents most at risk of poverty into training and employment, £5 million for specialist services to help disabled people access sustainable work, and £39 million for the all-age approach, supporting people furthest from the labour market towards employment. The Government is also giving consideration in the formulation of the Child Poverty Delivery Plan, which will be set out to Parliament before we rise for the election, to further measures that will support individuals to access employment as part of our work to tackle child poverty.
Question number 5, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reported warnings that a significant proportion of the medical workforce is experiencing stress, anxiety and burnout.
First Minister.
President, I am deeply grateful for the continued efforts of all our NHS workers in the face of sustained demand. It is thanks to their hard work and the focus and investment from this Government that we are seeing downward trends across nearly all waiting list indicators. This is having a real impact on people's lives, with more operations, long waits down for 7 months in a row and the number of GPs going up. None of this would be possible without the commitment of our hard-working NHS staff, and we take their health and well-being very seriously. That is why a dedicated work-related stress policy developed in partnership with unions and employers is due to be published shortly. And it's why we continue to invest each year in national wellbeing programmes to ensure staff can access rapid, compassionate, psychological and emotional help if needed.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. Presiding Officer, this week research from the Medical and Dental Defence Union of Scotland suggested as many as 66% of doctors in Scotland had experienced burnout or were living with its effects. This comes after the General Medical Council found last year that a third of doctors had considered leaving the profession and more than half of doctors in training were at risk of burnout. Both the Royal College of Emergency Medicine and the Royal College of Midwives point to safe staffing levels as being essential for patient safety. Yet, despite writing this into law, the Scottish Government are continually failing to meet them, leaving NHS staff caught in a vicious cycle of stress-related illness. So can I ask the First Minister, when will the Scottish Government deliver safe staffing levels as promised, taking the pressure off of staff, giving them the time to deliver the care they want to give, and genuinely look after those who look after us?
First Minister.
President, I recognise the importance of the issues that Mr Whittle raises, because upon those issues depend the effective delivery of services within the National Health Service. So the steps that the Government takes to support staff are important. I set out in my earlier answer the investment in the wellbeing of staff that we take forward, but we also have an expansion of the number of staff working in the National Health Service. There are more staff working in the NHS now than when this Government took office. It's an increase of over 27%, with more nurses and midwives, and there are more medical and dental consultants. I think what I would say to Mr Whittle is that those commitments to expansion of staff are important. They are also helping us to deliver results with the sustained reduction in waiting times in the National Health Service, the increase in the number of procedures that have been undertaken, and for that I express my gratitude to the staff of the National Health Service for all that they contribute to make that possible.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Our hard-working NH staff always do the best they can, but they are being driven to burnout. Protecting the well-being of staff is a vital part of ensuring that patients get the care and support that they need, but we are facing a workforce well-being crisis. That is the case. So what tangible action will the First Minister take in response to the staff who are thinking about retiring early and leaving Scotland's NHS because of burnout, not because they wish to? We really need their skills, and we should value that experience that they have.
First Minister.
I agree with the point that Carol Mockin makes. I want staff to feel fulfilled in their work. I want them to be able to make their contribution. I think the evidence is there that that is happening, because we are seeing that increased level of activity within the National Health Service and that sustained reduction in long waits, which I promised the public I would deliver, and I am delivering it for people. And that's only been possible because of the commitment that's been made by staff and the resources that have been put in by the Scottish Government to make it possible. I do stress the fact that we have wellbeing support that's in place across all health boards in the country to make sure that staff feel well supported, and that is an important priority for the Government.
Question number 6, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to ensure the long-term financial and operational stability of specialist domestic abuse services in the Highlands.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, we remain steadfast in our commitment to preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls, and have allocated over £30 million through the Scottish Budget to this vital work in 2026-27. This includes around £1.25 million to services in the Highlands through the Delivering Equally Safe Fund for the next financial year, to enable recipients to continue their work to prevent violence and support survivors. As noted in our Equally Safe delivery plan, we are committed to developing a flexible and stable funding model that reflects the ambitions of Equally Safe.
Rhoda Grant.
The First Minister will be aware that women's aid groups in the Highlands have moved from a service-level agreement to a procurement process with Highland Council, and that's left them facing significant cuts. Not only do they face cuts in council funding, but their multi-agency risk assessment conference funding and refuge funding are also at risk. Neither do they have their Scottish Government funding for next year in place. A cross-party group of MSPs have requested an urgent meeting with Highland Council, but have had no response. So, with domestic abuse on the rise, will the First Minister confirm Scottish Government funding for these groups, and will he also intervene with Highland Council in order to protect these specialist services?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the significance of the issue that Rhoda Grant raises, and the Government is providing funding directly to Women's Aid in Inverness to the tune of £219,000. Obviously, the issues that Rhoda Grant raises with me are around programmes and services that are funded by Highland Council. I'm aware that, as she has said in her question, which I'm aware from colleagues, there has been cross-party representation to Highland Council on this question, and in the light of the representations made to me, I will ask the relevant Minister to write to the Leader of Highland Council to request engagement with cross-party MSPs on that important issue.
Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, just like the Highlands, my area of Western Bartonshire is faced with an ever-increasing number of incidents of domestic abuse. It was reported that a total number of women and children experiencing domestic abuse in Western Bartonshire who asked for help rose by 7.59% to 1,729 in just 1 year. Presiding Officer, these are shocking figures, making Western Bartonshire the local authority with the second largest number of incidents recorded by 10,000 people. At the same time, services offering vital support are starving for funding. When I brought this up during the Equalities Committee on Tuesday, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government blamed misogyny and not their own government's shortcomings. So can the First Minister guarantee that services in the Highlands, in Western Bartonshire and across the country will receive the funding they deserve?
First Minister.
Well, there is provision in the Government's budget for financial support to the funding for tackling domestic violence and the abuse that women and girls suffer, and that is to the tune of over £30 million in the budget. And I've made no secret in my answers to all questions about violence against women and girls that the behaviour of men has got to be confronted. So it's a completely legitimate argument for that to be made in Parliament or in parliamentary committees. Now, what I would say to Pam Gossel is there is an important opportunity coming up in the course of the next few weeks to vote to provide this resource to women's aid organisations and to tackle domestic violence. And that will only happen if Parliament supports the Government's budget. I will certainly be voting for the Government's budget, and I would encourage others to do likewise.
Thank you. Move to constituency and general supplementaries. And I call George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's been revealed that during the financial crisis, Peter Mandelson was selling our economy down the river. Our First Minister, then the Finance Secretary, was working all hours to protect Scotland's economy and the people of Scotland. The Labour Party's old friend was undermining him every step of the way, leaking sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein. Can the First Minister tell me if he is aware of any impact this Westminster scandal has had on any Scottish financial institutions?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I am absolutely appalled by the revelations that have come forward in recent days about the involvement of Peter Mandelson in sharing information at the height of the financial crisis with Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted paedophile, and he was doing that as a serving government minister, and that somehow was overlooked when he became Keir Starmer's nominee to be the United Kingdom's ambassador to the United States. Now, at the time of the financial crash, I was taking decisions as Finance Minister to make sure that investment in housing could be sustained when private investment had stopped. These were direct financial decisions which were affecting the livelihoods of people in Scotland. I'm appalled that we were being undermined at the same time. Now, what I've asked my Permanent Secretary to do is to explore whether there was any risk undertaken to the strength of the decision-making in the Scottish Government, and I've also asked for that in relation to the engagement I had with the United Kingdom ambassador to the United States last year when I was acting to protect the Scotch whisky industry. It's an absolutely atrocious set of circumstances, an appalling judgment by the Prime Minister, and it is dreadful that Scotland and the United Kingdom have been exposed to such weakness as a consequence of the poor decision-making of the Prime Minister.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given everything the First Minister has just said, none of which I would disagree with, does he have any regrets about staying in Washington DC in September last year at the residence of the disgraced former UK Ambassador Peter Mandelson, given everything that was known about his relationship with the convicted paedophile
It's
Jeffrey
here,
Epstein?
Mr Fraser.
I was not responsible for the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to the United States. That was the foolish and inept decision of the Prime Minister to appoint Anas Sarwar's old friend as the ambassador to the United States. Now, when I go on overseas trips, I have a choice about where I stay.
First Minister.
Yeah.
So, First Minister, I am really keen that we have an opportunity for optimal scrutiny. That cannot occur if members are shouting. First Minister.
And the first people to complain if I had chosen to spend public money staying in a hotel rather than in the British Embassy would be the Conservative Party members in this Parliament. And just to give them all total, complete information, when I went to Lusaka in Zambia and when I went to Lilongwe in Malawi, I stayed in the British High Commissioner's residence to make sure that I was being careful and prudent with the public purse, as the people understand me to do. And of course, as the Conservative Party are shouting and bawling at me about this whole issue, let me remind them that one of their colleagues, using AI, is wasting hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money asking pointless parliamentary questions. It's Douglas Lumsden, and they should all be ashamed of themselves.
Thank you. I'm sure members don't intend to behave in a way that delays proceedings and prevents other members scrutinising the government. Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Earlier this week, operators at Glasgow Airport announced that they are increasing their passenger drop-off charges from £6 to £7 for just 15 minutes. These exorbitant charges will not just hit working people, their friends and their family trying to go on holiday. It's affecting residents in nearby streets of north of Paisley who say their streets being congested by airport traffic. When the First Minister stands up, he'll be standing in the very same spot he stood in 2009 when he cancelled the Glasgow Airport rail link. Does he finally regret the decision, his decision, to cancel that project, given the detrimental impact that has had on our economy residents and passengers?
First Minister.
The government faces hard political and financial choices at times, and we take them. That's what responsible government is all about. And the hard reality we faced in the aftermath of the financial crash, in which Anna Sarwar's old friend was Peter Mandelson, and he was leaking information to Jeffrey Epstein. We faced hard choices about our capital budget, and I had to take them as Finance Minister. Now, on the question of charges at Glasgow Airport, these are decisions for a private company that have been taken forward. But what people can rely on from this Scottish Government is that we'll take the wise and considered decisions to invest in our economy, as we've done on countless rail links around the country, the Leavenmouth Railway, the Airdrie-Bathgate Railway, the Borders Railway, all delivered by this Government, and we're determined to carry on that record.
Claire Hawkey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I remind Chamber I'm a practising NHS nurse. This week, the Labour UK Government admitted that it does not know how many NHS staff will be affected by its proposed changes of immigration rules. Once again, the Labour Party are harming our health service in their blind pursuit of reform policies. Does the First Minister agree with me that people deserve answers from Anna Sarwar on whether he supports Keir Starmer's plans to slam the door in the face of workers keeping our hospitals and care homes running? And can he confirm that his SNP Scottish Government will oppose these Labour plans and stand up for our valued NHS staff?
On devolved matters.
Presiding Officer, there's been a 77% drop in the number of health and care visas being granted by the Home Office, and that is going to have a direct effect on our health and care system, where in the last survey I saw, social care workers, for example, were 26% of those workers were workers that had come from other countries. Now, we face challenges in finding the volume of available labour that we require in our system, despite the fact that we've increased health and social care employment. So these measures by the UK Labour Government are directly damaging to the operation of our health and care system, and I can assure Claire Hawkey of the determination of the Scottish Government to make sure that we reverse these policies.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Recently I met with Star Rape Crisis Centre in Kilmarnock, which supports survivors aged 13 and above across Ayrshire. Despite covering a large area, Star have fewer than 3 full-time staff. They cannot meet the demand and find it a challenge to advertise their service widely because of their concern for survivors being stuck for months in their growing waiting lists. By contrast, other centres across Scotland supporting significantly lower populations employ several times more staff, raising serious questions about how funding is allocated. First Minister, can you explain how the Scottish Government calculates and allocates funding to rape crisis centres, why there is such a stark disparity in staffing levels for the same service, and what immediate action will be taken to ensure that the Star Rape Crisis Centre receives the funding needed to meet demand? First Minister.
The funding which will be going to the organisation will be coming through the Equally Safe programme. Sharon Dowie raises a fair point to which I can't give her a definitive answer as to what the disparity is in terms of the allocations. But I will look into the comparative position in the organisation that she's put to me, and I'll ask Ms Somerville to write to her to explain the rationale, and I'm very happy to discuss it further in the light of that reply.
Paul Sweeney.
Presiding Officer, the First Minister aware that the Centre for Contemporary Arts in Glasgow announced it was going into liquidation this week, with the loss of 39 jobs directly, as well as tenants and freelancers also affected. You also know that Creative Scotland, the public body, owns the building and has done for the last half-century. It's been a fixture in the Glasgow arts scene. They have failed to intervene in this situation, and it does not square with the Government's Fair Work commitments on consultation, dignity at work and worker protection. So I asked the First Minister to intervene directly with Creative Scotland and order them to set up a successor organisation to re-employ those workers and reopen this critical cultural organisation in the heart of Glasgow, in a city which has already suffered greatly from the art school's ongoing fire and aftermath and the wider issues of regeneration on Sauchiehall Street. I hope he will commit to doing that.
First Minister.
Creative Scotland have engaged with the Centre for Contemporary Arts over a long period of time to try to find a solution to the Centre's financial challenges. The when the CCA became insolvent, Creative Scotland were not able to issue any further payments under the CCA's multi-year funding award. That would not have been an appropriate use of public money. The Scottish Government, through Creative Scotland, will, however, continue to engage on the issue and to work, as Creative Scotland is currently doing, to find a new operator for the building as soon as possible, recognising the cultural significance of the CCA in Glasgow. So I think it's one of these cases where the rules on public finance and the ability to deploy that where an organisation becomes insolvent put a real obstacle in being able to operate continuously. But there is work underway through Creative Scotland to find alternative routes, and I hope that bears fruit. And obviously, ministers will keep Mr Sweeney involved and informed of the developments.
Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Since 2015, I have been supporting WASPI women in my Rotherham and Wishaw constituency. WASPI campaigners from across Scotland have come to the Parliament today. Some of them are in the gallery, and they are rightly challenging the Labour Government's latest U-turn, which denies WASPI women compensation for a second time. Labour Party politicians, some of whom are also in the chamber today, tweeted photos of standing shoulder to shoulder with WASPI women, only to portray them in power. At this time, when more than 2 Scottish WASPI women a day are dying without compensation, what assurance can the First Minister provide to WASPI women that the SNP Scottish Government will stick to its principles and continue to stand by their side, unlike the so-called Scottish Labour Party?
First Minister.
Presiding, can I begin by reiterating my strong support for the WASPI women and to congratulate and thank Claire Adamson for the absolutely tenacious way in which she has pursued this issue on a constant basis. The repeated betrayal of WASPI women by the UK Labour Government is absolutely appalling. And the fact that so many Labour politicians promised WASPI women before the election that they would have full application of the compensation schemes and have now deserted those WASPI women after the election tells us all we need to know about the opportunism of voting Labour at any election.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. For over 2 years now, Aberdeen Royal Infirmary has reported worsening ambulance stacking caused by spiralling waiting times. Last week, further delays were caused when a patient sprayed CS gas into the eyes of a nurse and a security guard, locking down ARI altogether. In fact, figures show police are called to ARI every other day to deal with assaults and disturbances. At the heart of this are exhausted, dedicated staff and patients waiting in agony, bearing the brunt of a lack of government action. So when will the First Minister finally get a grip of this situation at ARI and personally intervene to help these hard-working staff and long-suffering patients?
First Minister.
So the Health Secretary is actively engaged with NHS Grampian on the issues at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. We work in partnership with the Scottish Ambulance Service, which is resourced to ensure that the needs of patients are met. On a majority of occasions, Scottish Ambulance Service emergency incidents are managed without any need to transfer to hospital, but there is a need when those transfers are required for that to be efficient and sustainable. And these issues are at the heart of the engagement between the Government and NHS Grampian to improve the situation at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary.
Joe Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I join disabled people, third-party organisations and colleagues in welcoming the first Disabled People's Cabinet hosted by the First Minister this week. I was therefore appalled to learn that the Labour Party have quietly lodged a motion to annul the changes this SNP government is trying to make to voting rights on local integrated joint boards. These changes would give disabled people, unpaid carers and people who use social care packages a vote on the services that affect them. Not content with stripping disabled people of their benefits, the Labour Party is now trying to silence their voices on local services. Does the First Minister therefore join me in calling on the Labour Party to back the voting rights of disabled people, carers and other people with lived experience and reverse this shameful betrayal?
On matters of devolved responsibility.
President Officer, I was deeply grateful to disabled people who met with the Cabinet on Tuesday, and we had a very substantial and thought-provoking conversation about the challenges and issues that are faced by disabled people. It was clear, one of the clear requests of disabled people was for them to have a voice in integrated joint boards and to be able to exercise that through voting rights. And that's what the government is providing for. I'm absolutely lost for words that the Labour Party is opposing us on all of this. And I think it's another lesson that people have got to be very, very careful about voting for the Labour Party, because whether it's WASPy women or disabled people, what they can rely on is the Labour Party will let them down.
Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week, the Scottish Government are in court arguing that evil men should continue to be housed in the female prison estate. Now, the First Minister wanted as much information about this in the public domain, which is why he released the written case. In that written case, the government's defence of their position is to make a comparison between a mum taking a baby boy into a changing room is somehow the same as murderers, male murderers, being in the female prison estate. Is the First Minister genuinely happy that that is the defence his government are making? And is he content to spend public money on this court case?
First Minister.
President Officer, this is a live court case that's been heard at this present moment. And what the government is doing, as any responsible government must, is ensuring that the policy position that's applied complies with all of our legal obligations, including, of course, the Scotland Act and the European Convention on Human Rights.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. Point of order, Edward Mountain.
Very briefly, Presiding Officer, during general questions, I raised a question on aquaculture. It would have been fair of me to raise that I have an interest in a wild salmon fishery. So I do that now, Presiding Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mountain. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Claire Haughey, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the gallery to do so.